Parties are great, but you usually need a reason to have a party, and the Super Bowl is only once a year. Luckily, we have party games. Today, I am talking to Chrissy of EAP Toy and Games about just that. How you doing, Chrissy?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're freezing here. I'm in the Detroit area, and we're really cold. I'm not going to complain to you about cold and snow because you're in like a mountain state or something.
I am, but Denver's actually very pleasant winter, except for this week. But it seems like everyone's struggling this week. It's been freezing.
Someone told me that. I knew someone that lived in Denver, and they said that, every time they give those snow reports, that's like the snow up in the mountains. Like down here in the city, it's, not as bad.
Yeah, no, that really is how it is. So you'll get like maybe 1-2 days of snow, and then the next day it'll be 50 degrees, and then it's gone. And then you just have like nice sunny Colorado. Yeah. In fact, actually, the mountains were 20 degrees warmer than they were down in Denver this week.
Really?
Yeah.
Just okay. So
vortex coming in. Yeah.
Are you a skier or a snowboarder?
I'm not. I got started. I moved around a lot growing up, so I didn't grow up in Colorado. So I didn't try skiing until I was an adult. So there was a lot of fear there. I tried it a couple times. I tried snowboarding. It's just not for me.
Okay. Yeah.
But I love the mountains. It's beautiful up there. I love going.
Yeah, I've never. I'm not a winter outdoor person.
Yeah.
I mean, I love winter because I prefer indoor stuff, and if it's 75 and sunny outside, then it's sort of okay. What's all the outside stuff I have to do? What weeds need pulling? What grass needs cutting?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I kind of like it when I'm forced to be inside.
Yeah, I hear you.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know that you were in communications and then went a couple different directions, and I'm just wondering how that path took you to board game design and publishing, right? Because you're a designer and publisher.
Yep, I am a self-publisher. So you're right. I went to school. I got a degree in communications. I wasn't quite clear what I was going to do when I graduated. But when I was in school, I worked at a flower shop. And then when I left or graduated, I took a job in a corporate setting. It was human resources. And I lasted one day and I said, this is definitely not for me. I needed to do something creative and using my brains, hands, something. So in the meantime, I took a job in Denver at a flower shop. And then to offset the fact that I wasn't going to be making a salary, I was cocktailing at a performing arts center at night. But I loved both gigs. Okay. And I stuck with them both for a very long time. And after about 17 years in the floral industry, I had given up my second job. At this point, my kids were old enough where it was busy. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I kind of took this compilation of everything I loved, which was communications, working with people, being creative, humor, and it all just kind of fell together in one night when I was out with friends and we were literally coming up with an idea just to entertain ourselves in this one moment. And that kind of just tapped a little thing in me that said, oh, I like this. This is something I really enjoy. And it's taking everything that I didn't realize I was working towards that whole time. And it was game design. So after doing the first one, I knew I had more in me. I was like, okay, I still have things in me. Where can I take this new ideas and this energy? And so I shape-shifted it a little bit more to the family sector. Doesn't mean I'm still not, my first game was an adult-oriented, but I still like that area, but It was just a good fit for me.
So your first game was Friend or Foe.
Yes.
And by the way, I'm a sucker for puns. I love the friend or FAUX. Very, very clever. That one's a little more adult oriented, right? I remember seeing one of your TikToks how you were on interviewed on a morning news program, and like the anchor, it was funny because he picked up a card. He's like, "Oh, can't do that one."
Yeah, and believe it or not, that question was actually pretty tame, but it gives me giggles that that was his reaction. Yeah, it is an adult-centered party game, and when we were doing it, we had a lot of people like, I can't play this with my family, but I want to play with my family. So they had to like water it down.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, all right, let's do a family version. And Friend or Foe, we licensed with Goliath. And while we started working on the family version, we started to think like, oh, this really has some legs, because the audience was wider, but it still had the same gameplay and still same appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to take a lot of the content from that, but then I'd say about 50% of that content. And then how do we make something, you know, same gameplay and make it family friendly? Because a lot of the times what you find is things start off family friendly and then they make the adult version. So it was just an interesting flip for us.
Yeah.
But in the play testing and watching kids play, and even up today when I'm showing the game and I have families walk up, I love that interaction of what that does for people. So we decided to self-publish. And by we, I mean me. So my partners in Friend or Foe, they all had careers. They all were doing this thing. They say, Chrissy, take it, have it, go for it. And that is one of the first ones I did, was just now called Yoo-Hoo, because we realized the Friend or Foe didn't necessarily translate more to a family audience as far as visual appeal or even the understanding of what Friend or Foe is. I mean, you get that, but maybe if 8-year-olds looking at it, they are not going to, they're, you know, what does that mean?
Right.
We just changed the whole thing. And in Friend or Foe, there's a bullshit card, and then Yoo-Hoo, it's now the stuffed bologna. You get to call it someone's bologna. So we just wanted to make it a little more tactile, a little bit more fun, a little bit more like kid friendly, but still fun for that wide range of audience. So it's still fun for just adults if adults wanted to play, but it's fun if adults, kids, and teens all want to play together.
Right. Yeah. You notice that, or I noticed that kids games can be played and enjoyed with adults, but adult games, it doesn't work the other way. You know, adult games can't be enjoyed by little kids.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny because I feel a little, since my games are designed for 8-year-olds, and now when I started, it was more kind of in this toy space. And then last year I was like, okay, I need to put myself more into the game space. And I was really nervous about it. I still kind of have this, like, I don't know if this is where I belong, because my games are 5-year-olds or less. They're very quick to learn. They're very easy. Do I compete with some of these hobby games and hardcore games? And, you know, I don't know, but I finally just realized, you know what, there has to be kind of this catalyst to those games, right? Like when you're saying like, oh, you know, well, so you have to introduce them here so that eventually they'll be ready for Warhammer, right? Like you have to give a kid a reason to want to play and want to compete, but at a very easy level, so that eventually they're kind of like, oh, I like that. I want to win. How do I figure out how to win? Even if it's a simple question-based game or a luck-based game.
Like a gateway
Or the gateway, yeah, the gateway drug to some of these harder games. And there's some out there. There are definitely strategy games that are family friendly. There's definitely, thousands. So it's not, you know, but it's pretty niche. You know, it's expanded the game industry, but like, I realize my market is a little bit more mass than it is someone who's into some of the harder or more strategy-based hobby.
There's nothing wrong from an economic standpoint for going with something that's more mass.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I played some of the adult games, and you know, it's sort of like camping. There's like 100 things that have to line up perfectly for it to be an enjoyable evening. You know, when you're playing an adult party game. You know, just like when you're camping, there's 100 things that got to be perfect for it to be an enjoyable time. And if one of those things goes off, you know, it can be a mess. You know, I've had some great times, you know, playing the adult party games, but I've also had a lot of great times, you know, playing the ones with the family.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because a lot of people, you almost have this like camp of people who I don't like games. I don't like learning games. I don't want to, you know. So for me, even with my own kids, that's the audience. They like, just tell me how to do it. Please do not make me read the rules. Please do not. They want someone to be able to just tell them what to do.
Right.
It's really kind of where I fall. And even for me, when I'm learning a new game, and now I'm kind of a little bit more in this, and I have friends who are publishers whose games are a little bit harder, it takes me some time to process, okay, how do I play this? How does this, I get it. It's an event, right? It's a night where you can do a party game or sit down with your family and have 30 minutes of playing, and that's all you need. But with kids, and anyone who has kids, you have kids, you know, sometimes you're just looking for something to do. But as a parent, like I would love to enjoy what they're playing as well, so that we're equally having fun. Like I don't feel like I'm just going through the process of playing a game just to play a game.
Right.
I want it to be like, you know, this fun, even if it's just 20, 30 minutes, it's fun and we're connecting, we're sharing something, and we're going to leave with laughter. So I try to put humor in a lot of my games because that's how I connect with people. So
right.
I know that I'm not going to be able to even sit down and tell them how to play Wingspan without them being like, what? You know what I mean? And Wingspan would generally be more on the easier side to learn, right?
Sure. Yeah. 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 I had a question. I see you wearing your EAP swag.
Yeah.
What does EAP stand for?
So EAP stands for Easily Amused Productions. So when I did Friend or Foe with my friends, our company name was Easily Amused Productions. And then when I branched off to start my own individual business, I still wanted to pay like, you know, homage to that. So I just shortened it down to EAP Toy and Games.
Okay. Lots of games, just one toy?
Just one toy. Because it's funny because people say that, but when you go to a toy store, you go to a toy store, you don't go to a toys store. So I'm like, toy, it's plural.
Yeah. You know,
yeah.
Like, you know, should I be a jerk and tease her about that? And I'm like, obviously,
it is. You know what it is? That's funny. I get it. And a lot of people think it's EAP Toys and Games. I'm like, it's just toy.
Yeah. Well, it's a car dealership, not a cars dealership.
Exactly. Yes.
So,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about. There's a couple of things, a lot of things I want to talk about. I wanted to ask about sort of where you get your ideas for the games and how being a parent sort of, I mean, you sort of touched on a little bit about how being a parent, you know, adjusts your focus. And has that sort of changed as your kids have gotten older?
For sure. So my kids currently are 12 and 16. And when I kind of fell into this whole realm they were 7 and 11.
Okay.
I connect with my kids through play and through humor. So it's very easy for me to find something that, you know, I could pick up anything and make up something funny. Or, you know, we used to do silly little hand games to distract my son when we go out to dinner. It was just like this, how we connect with them. And they would tell you too, like, that's, you know, if I can make them laugh or vice versa, then, you know, it's great. So when my older son started getting older, especially with Friend or Foe and then moving into Yoo-Hoo, which is this question answer game, mm-hmm. I started to realize that this game that's based on questions. Now, trust me, I know I'm not the first person who's come up with a party game that's based on questions. There's lots of them out there. So I've had to come up with, you know, how do I differentiate mine from the others? And one of the things is it's these 5 rounds of questions, right? Mm-hmm. So you start off a little bit lighthearted, and as you get up to round 5, they get a little bit more interpersonal, but nothing too serious. So I always say, like, this isn't therapy. This is a game. I want this to be lighthearted. I want it to be fun. And when I was playing with kids kind of in that early teenage or watching siblings play that fell in the same age as my kids, I started to realize, like, oh, they really like this, which is interesting for me because if my kids come home and I say, how is school? Or, you know, they'll just be like, fine.
Yeah, right.
You want to open up. So I was like, okay, I didn't set out to make this game to be a reason that my kids were opening up. It just happens to be a tool that allows them to feel like they're opening up without realizing they're doing so because they think they're playing a game. So I was like, all right, this is a bit of my teenage secret weapon. And I started to ask, like, what out of these games, which is your favorite? They'd always pick Yoo-Hoo because teenagers are inherently selfish. Most kids are. And that I don't say that in a bad way. They just are.
Yeah, well, sure.
But they want to talk. You just have to give them an opportunity without them making them think that that's what they're doing. You know, putting the power of the question in their hands. Mm-hmm. They want to know what you know about them, but then the tables are turned and then it's my turn to ask. And then I have to see what do they know about me or they don't know about me. And sometimes you're just surprised at how much kids do or don't know about you. And really, they are listening, right? This whole thing about like electronics, like I'm not trying to fight that. Like that's a losing battle. Mm-hmm. But what I can do is try to take 20, 30 minutes of their time and figure out how am I going to connect with them at a level that they're not going to think is annoying or that they're going to hate. And for me, that is through easy gameplay, just sitting, talking, coming up with things that allow us to just either connect on humor or open up just by simple questions or having just like quick competitive, gameplay, even like through a game of Yahtzee. I played Scrabble with my son and his friend the other day and we had a blast. So, at that moment I was like, what do we do? Let's play a game. It's just such an easy go-to for any situation.
Right. What are, you said that your kids the oldest was 16.
Yeah.
So that's in the thick of social media and being on social media. What do they think of being sort of on the same platform as their mom?
Well, it's funny because a lot of the time, not every time, I'll show them something I'm about to post.
Uh-huh.
And they'll be pretty honest that they're like, no. But they also understand that I'm coming at this from a business perspective. This isn't just me. I mean, I could do a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, just your TikToks are
putting my social stuff out there. I'm really not a big poster socially. So it's a real battle for me to have to be like, use this as a tool because it's such I have a love-hate with it because I love actually the creative side and trying to think like, how am I going to put myself out there without constantly just showing the games over and over?
Yeah.
And that works. That works actually sometimes. But for me, I'm like, I need this to be somewhat creative or I'm going to lose my mind.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. The stuff that, some of the content that I post is kind of silly. My son kind of digs it, but
yeah,
I find myself not talking to him about like, the frustrations I have with social media and stuff like that, because I'm just like, I don't know. I just feel weird. It's like he shouldn't be hearing that from his dad,
Yeah.
Like, it's got to be weird enough for him to have a dad who's, has a YouTube channel. I'm not going to start having conversations with him. We talk about it a lot, but I try to temper that, a little bit.
Yeah. I think for my kids, they are understanding that it is a part of the process, and they're very sweet and they're very good to me, and they want me to succeed. Mm-hmm. So I think that they are. I mean, even my older son at one point posted on one of his other ones like, "Hey, follow my mom," which I thought was great, and it boosted me by like 100, and I was like, "Yes,
what? Nice."
Yeah, it was really sweet, and so, brand building, I guess, you have to believe that someone is going to see your stuff and that they're going to be like, oh, his mom makes games, or how, hopefully I don't do anything to embarrass them. They're just, at this point they know me and my personality. They're like, all right.
Yeah. And, you don't have anything, you have nothing cringy on your TikToks that, it's fine.
Yeah. I don't know. I could go back and I'd probably be like, oh, but I don't. I just leave them be. It's posted. It's done.
Does your family travel with you to like the conventions and stuff?
They don't. And it would be great if they could. I've done some direct to consumer shows in Colorado. My older son has helped me at those, which is really nice.
That's cool.
But when I travel, it's expensive. They're usually in school. Something's going on. They've got their own stuff going on. My husband obviously has his own job. If they can help me, I use all the resources.
Right. What are some of your, I wanted to talk a little bit about the conventions just because I want to hear some war stories from some of the conventions. We'll start things off with the bloodshed at your booth at PAX Unplugged.
Yeah, I couldn't believe. I saw it happening, and then they walked away, and I didn't realize that. And it was a young girl. It was a family, and she was probably 12. It's just like from a mother's perspective, it didn't bother me. From the fact that it happened on my booth day one on my white. I was like, this can't be happening. I was like, I have to cover this. I can't. It was obvious that it was blood. So, I had a little bit of a like, I think the parents knew, but they didn't know what to say. And we were all kind of in this position. I was like, are you going to buy a game? Just kidding.
It's the least you could do.
Yeah, it was fine. And the kids were sweet. But, I didn't see that one coming, but
that was a clever way to cover it up. She just, the audience to know, she covered it up with a little EAP logo.
Sticker. Yeah, there was no covering up. I had nothing else I could do, but I just looked over and looked at my stickers and I go, this is it. And there it stayed the rest of the show. So worked out.
Have you ever been to Gen Con?
I haven't been to Gen Con. It's actually an incredibly hard show to get into to show if you haven't done it before. I should go just to go check it out because I've heard it's pretty intense.
It is.
It sounds overwhelming, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a seasoned expert. I've only been like 3 times. But it's it's just massive, and there's so much stuff going on. I just like some of the ancillary stuff. I'm not a cosplayer. That's not my jam. I'm no good at it, or wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But man, I love to see the people that just go way into it and just their stuff just looks so good.
Yeah. Have you been to PAX Unplugged then?
I have not.
Okay, so
is there a PAX Plugged?
There is not but there. It started off. What did it start off as? PAX West and PAX East, and then they went to Unplugged, which is where all the board gaming stuff came in. But it sounds a bit of a baby version of Gen Con, and maybe I'm wrong, but even PAX Unplugged was a lot. Like it's a pretty well attended show, and it was my first time doing a direct consumer show in the gaming market. So seeing everyone that was doing cosplay and it was much more entertaining than being at a trade show, which is very I mean, I'm in the toy and game business, so even the trade shows are more. I mean, my husband's an engineer, so I can't imagine his are probably like watching paint dry. But
yes,
even at the toy shows, at least people are excited, and it's usually this fun environment. Mm-hmm. But it's still business, right? So you're still seeing business. So being at that direct-to-consumer show and just seeing people like really invested was really fun for me. Like I was not bored at all at my booth.
So you enjoy the trade shows?
I enjoy.
Or not trade. I'm sorry. The more the direct-to-consumer shows.
Yeah,
I enjoy going to these shows.
I mean, it's such a different thing, and I'm still learning. That was my first real direct-to-consumer show. I've done markets where I get to sell things.
Oh, okay.
But when you are selling to people who are buying your game because they either want your game or don't want your game, it's so different. They're not buying it because they have to think, then how are they going to resell this? They're buying it just because they like it, or they know someone who like it, or they want to play it.
Right.
That's really cool. When you're trying, it's such a different sell. And I will say, when I left PAX Unplugged, I didn't know what I was doing. Like I still had that trade show mentality in my head where I'm selling to a buyer versus a person. And so I was like, oh my gosh, next time I do this, my thinking has to change. They just want to play. They want to walk up. And if I'm just like, let's play this, I don't have to sell it necessarily. The game should sell itself. Yeah. At a trade show, I have to think differently when I'm selling.
It kind of seems like at a trade show, you're making the intellectual or monetary argument, and at the direct consumer, you're kind of making the emotional connection.
Yep. For sure. Yeah. I'm not, if I'm looking at like package design and I know I'm competing with other games on the shelf, and even if I go to, for instance, Gamma last year was my first B2B trade show. I had just asked, do you sell family games? And then a lot of them are like, yes, that's what we need. Right? So that gaming market, the market's getting older and they're having a younger audience. So they're trying to find things to like fill that little space. And I was like, okay, this is my niche, right? This is how I have to kind of fill this customer out.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, even with my lunchroom game, there is light strategy. So I really want them to know, like, there is luck in this game, but there is strategy. And I know that that's what you guys love. And so let me just explain how, so that you can then turn it. Because once it's out of my hands, it's in the store, I have to be reliant on that person to be able to sell my game.
Yeah.
And so that market's interesting too. So I know, like this year, I had to put more of attention on direct to consumer because I need my games to be played.
Yeah.
Right. It's great. I'm so thankful for even if the store buys my games because that's business. But I know them; they're just sitting on the shelf and they have to sell too.
Yeah, for sure. The game you just mentioned, the lunchroom. That's take me through really quick. What that one's? It's filling your tray. How does that game play?
Yeah. So each player gets their own lunch tray. So think of that as like your little mini game board. And your goal is to be the first player to fill your lunch tray with one of each of the categories. So your main dish, your vegetable, your fruit, your dessert, and your milk. And where the strategy comes in is there's more main dishes than there are veggies. There's more veggies than there are fruit. There's more fruit than milk and then dessert. And then you have your cast of characters that are either helping or hurting your chances. So if you grab a mean girl card on your turn, you have to make two players trade. And you have to think of it as like, okay, how am I going to mess those two up? But that helps me, but hurts them.
Okay.
Or if you get a bully card, you get to steal someone's card. Well, do you want to steal their dessert because you know that's one of the harder ones to get and you need it? You know, so there is some critical thinking. It's very simple, but it matters, right? It helps or hurt your chances. So, and then where the tater tot comes in is if you draw the food fight card, you have to fight for the tater tot, and there's always one less tot than there are players. So if you don't get it, then you have to dump your tray and just start over with an empty tray.
Okay.
And then like passing notes, you might have a really good tray on your turn. And if you grab passing notes, everyone has to pass their tray to the left. And then you have maybe someone next to you, their tray is terrible. So there's a little action, a little bit of luck, and a little bit of anticipation in that whole process of playing. So it can get like, you're fighting for the tater tot, but then also you have to think about like, okay, how am I going to help myself or hurt them?
It's ironic that foam tater tot is probably has more nutritional value than a real tater tot in a school lunchroom.
My son was just watching a whole thing on school lunches, and I will say, Jason, I was a lunch lady, and that is where the idea transpired. So when my kids were older, I said, I need a job where I can be at home while my kids are at school. And so I was like, I'll be a kitchen assistant, aka lunch lady. Yeah. So I did it for a year before COVID, and a year was enough. But it was, I went in at 9, left at 2, and I worked from the second I went in to the second I left. And clearly it, spawned the idea. But at the same time, I mean, those lunch trays are still there, right? If you went to public school, you know what that is. And so there's a real reaction to people seeing the lunch trays, and it's always like they want to grab it, or that tater tot, like they just want to touch it and squeeze it. And the tater tot's the best part, really. Yes. Lunch, so
well, I mean, that's where games like that, have an appeal to an older audience too. They remember the lunch tray, and then, from what you're describing with the strategy, and I can see how you could play that with someone really, really young that's not thinking about in those terms, but you can also play with people that are teenagers or older and that are thinking. About that strategy. So
I've seen some adults get pretty crazy in that game. I've had a kindergarten teacher, she played it with her audience who was 4 and 5, and she said what she did was took out all of the action cards and just left the food fight card in. But it was a way for her to get kids to learn their basic food groups and filling your lunch tray and having one. So on their turn, they would just fill their tray, but they still loved fighting for the tater tot. So I was like, what a great way to use it for a younger audience, right? But it is still fun for adults, yeah.
So from kindergarten all the way to Penn State?
Penn State, Ivy League, yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about what it's doing there.
So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but a lot of school bookstores are owned by Barnes & Noble. So and Barnes & Noble College and Barnes & Noble, the booksellers, are different yet the same. Okay. So I just had the opportunity, was reached out to from the buyer of Barnes & Noble College, and we had a meeting, and that process takes a long time. And then he was like, yes, let's test this in a couple of stores. And one of them just happened to be University of Pennsylvania. So I was like, great. So, but it's great. It was, you have to kind of figure out what games are going to work in an environment like that. The game that did well in both stores was my newest game, Go Big or Go Broke, because it kind of lends itself more to an audience of like college age and a little bit more teenage.
Well, you know that they're going to turn these all into drinking games.
Well, I will say leave it to adults, because I brought that game to bars and I had adults play it. And I said, don't change anything, just play it as is. And of course, leave them to still make it a totally inappropriate party game. And I was saying that to my husband. He goes, oh, we used to play like operation tournaments when we were in college. I don't know if he'd say tournaments, but they make some of the best drinking games are these kids games, because there's not a lot of thinking. You just have to,
Yeah,
and that Go Big or Go Broke's a lighthearted betting game. So now add, like, if you throw in real money, that makes it fun. Of course, drinking makes it, inhibitions are lower. So
which one's your latest? Is Go Big or Go Broke?
It's Go Big or Go Broke. Yeah.
Okay. Which one's your favorite?
I mean, it's hard because I have such a love for Yoo-Hoo because of where it came from, and I've seen such great interactions between people playing. Mm-hmm. But I really love the aesthetics of the lunchroom. I just think it's cute and it's clever and it's fun, and it's different than your typical game. So I really like that one. Go Big or Go Broke I love because it's funny and it's silly, but it's, that's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it's intended for.
I saw some of the people playing it, some of the videos, and it looks it looks pretty crazy. It's very active, get out of your seat and
But believe it or not, there's 100 different action cards in there, and they're like, again, that game is for 8 and up. They're all very simple, and the whole thing is like when you put big effort onto a simple action, like meowing like a cat. If you and I were playing, and I bet that I could beat you, it's funny seeing that. And like with kids too, when kids are playing with adults, kids seeing adults let go and be silly is super fun. I've seen kids play with the grandparents and vice versa. Does it, are people a little like, oh, if they're a little more introverted, that's okay. But at the same time, not everyone is also going to love Dungeons and Dragons. So I can't appease to everyone. I just have to know my audience and just say it's okay. But, I've also had kids feel like, oh, this allowed them to be silly. It's almost like controlled chaos, if you will. So,
speaking of knowing your audience and trying to design a game for everybody, do you find that it's better to know every game that's out there so you don't copy it? Or do you find it's better to just look, I just want to think of a great game, and if it's a duplicate of someone else's, so be it. This is my original thought.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There are hundreds of thousands of games on Amazon, right? So the chances of your game being similar to something is very high. Like I told you with Yoo-Hoo, I'm not the first person to come up with a question game. I had to figure out what is this that's going to differentiate mine from everything else that's out there. Mm-hmm. But I've come up with ideas that I have gone so far as started to writing rules and starting to play, and then I just deep dive search, like, okay, use every term possible on how I could describe this game, and Google that. Because something probably will come up, and I can tell you it will come up.
Right.
And I have things be eerily close where I just say, not even going to go. I maybe that one's not, it's still out there. Maybe it's not one that everyone knows, but it's still out there that it's enough for me to go, no, it's too close. But there's, people will say, well, I did a game and it does have this theme and things are similar, but it's different enough. And I'm like, well, if you feel it's different enough, then that's what you need to push for, right?
There's only so many mechanics.
Right. That's why, if you think about the strategy and hobby market, there's not just one game about dragons, right? There's not just one game about, building off of something, and there's what is it that makes it different? What is it that's going to make it sell? What are people going to be attracted to? And if you can find something that's a really good niche that's going to separate yourself, then by all means, like, do it, go for it.
Right. But, if you can get two games that are the same, but you take one and put it on a lunch tray with tater tots, that's going to change the whole experience.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you think it, like, the lunchroom has, hints of Uno, it has hints of Spoon, it has, there's, even if you don't think that you have been inspired by something or whatever, it's in there. Your brain has done something that's said, okay, this is how I want to do this. And that's okay, right? Look at judging mechanic games. There's a ton of them out there. Why is one doing better than the other? And then eventually it gets a little like, oh, okay, another one. It's just a different theme. But look at Monopoly. I mean, they print so many copies of Monopoly that I'm like, every household must have like 10 of these, right? No, they can sell them for $10. If you have someone who's an avid Seinfeld fan and there's a Seinfeld Monopoly, they're gonna buy it. So,
Yeah. Because it comes down to theme, and it comes down to the context instead of the content, and
right.
Like I said, there's a lot of things, a lot of movies, a lot of books that are similar, but they're great reads and great watches.
And if someone's got, there's these publishing companies who have a history of making great games and they put out a new game, they have a following. They're going to, if they're really, if they're going to put something out on Kickstarter, it's probably going to fund. If you have a really great artist behind your game, that's going to propel your audience. Big. Yeah. I mean, some of those games are mind blowing. I mean, I think mine are hard enough, and I look at some of these and I'm like, how did you even get this done?
Well, but it's the games that I talk about it with my gaming friends and my gaming groups, and we are more in awe of the people that can design these super simple games that are infinitely replayable. Almost more than the respect we have for people that could design a Gloomhaven or something like that. Because some of these super simple games are just brilliant in their simplicity. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, and then you play something that you're, for me, I'll be like, oh, why didn't I think of that? You know what I mean? Or I'll come up with an idea and I'll work on it and I'll think it's good, and then I play it. And then you have your playtesters come in and they play it. And when you don't see that, like, initial, like, what you thought was going to be so great, like, dang it, this is, it's hard, and you meet people who, it falls down to, like, licensing versus self-publishing. I mean, the reason I ended up going into self-publishing is licensing the odds are really hard.
Sure.
A lot of companies, I think I've read somewhere 1-3% chance of getting your product licensed.
Did you do Kickstarter?
I did, friend or foe. Yeah.
But not for the other ones?
No. So I went straight into self-publishing with those other ones.
Okay.
And so now I have this experience of licensing. I have the experience of self-publishing and the, pros and cons of both of those. And you just never know really what's going to hit. So I know people who've had really successful games and they are like, it's almost like lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. I thought that people still used Kickstarter if they were self-publishing.
Oh yeah, a lot of people do. After doing one Kickstarter, that was enough. It was so much work, and I had 3 other people doing it with me, so it helped. When I self-published Yoo-Hoo and The Lunchroom at the same time, ignorance is bliss, because I just did it. I printed the minimum amount that made sense price-wise for me, but wasn't, if a lot of times if you can do a Kickstarter, if you can do 500, 1,000 copies, it's a lot safer than doing 5, 10, 15,000 copies, which kind of gets you that price break.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did it. And I said,
wow,
just do it. I had the support of my husband, and I felt like, but there's nothing that's going to light a fire under your tush to get you to sell some stuff when you invest your own money and time.
Yep.
Okay, now I have to go to these trade shows. Now I have to be on TikTok. Now I have to do all these things, and learning what's gone right, figuring out, going through a distributor, using sales reps, doing my own Amazon. It's just been a real whirlwind.
Yeah. I mean, some of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know, one thing that they say is the best thing to kickstart or to jumpstart your passion is to remove the safety net.
Yeah, someone said to me before I really got into the self-publishing, she had a baby toy product, and she had the business with her mom, and she said, we got so far into the development, we couldn't turn back. And you almost have to do that to really force yourself. Now, I say this and knowing that I have the privilege of a supportive spouse, not only emotionally, but also financially. He helps put a roof over her head. He helped, I still work a part-time job to make sure that we're not, putting ourselves into a position we don't want to be in.
Right.
So I'm very thankful for that, and that's been a saving grace for me and given me the opportunity to be able to do that. With that being said, I still think it can be done by someone at a much smaller scale, and that you just have to build. And there is a real, you got to have some tenacity to want to do this. You have to, is your market just hobby, or are you okay only selling 500, 1,000 copies? Is your market like me, 5, 10, 15,000 copies I'm printing, and I'm competing with that, mass and trying to get out there and trying to find this market that I'm still trying to find, right? I'm still trying to find my target market. Who is it? Is it grandmas? Is it moms? Is it kids? What are
Right.
Yeah. So it's been a learning process, and it's, understanding you're not just a game designer for me anymore. I'm also now an entrepreneur. I have to understand the business side of it. I am doing it by myself with the help of paying other people to help me with certain things. So it's been a process for sure.
What's next? What's your game that you're working on right now, or what's
so I've actually had the luxury of working with a friend of mine. She comes from the toy space, but her and I have been working on some ideas, and we pitched. So I still pitch to companies for the possibility of licensing because I can't self-publish them all.
Sure.
Her and I worked on a couple of ideas that we have some kind of in the works, hopefully, if those go through. If they don't, then that's like a telltale to me if it's going to be the next one I self-publish. So I have another adult party game in mind. I have another family-friendly one. And, ideas are always going constantly in my head. So I'm just constantly writing down, even if it's like a title of a game and I have no concept at all of how it's played, I'm like, this would make a good game. Or sometimes if I see something, I'm like, that's a good mechanic. Let's add that to something. So yeah, we'll see.
Just real quick, it's kind of a random question, but you had mentioned mechanic. Do you think of like mechanics first or like theme first?
So friend or foe was definitely mechanics, even though the mechanic is very simple. I would say Go Big or Go Broke was mechanic, and Lunchroom was theme.
Oh, okay. So it's either one. Okay, that's cool.
Because sometimes I feel like for me, like even with the Lunchroom in particular, I envision, okay, you have the lunchroom, you have the lunch lady, you have the kids, and then when you have the kids, you have the mean girls, you have the bullies, you have the lunch aid, there was just all these parts that kind of just, I was like, this would make a good game if I could figure out how to play it. And then that's how that transpired.
Right. Okay. All right. Very cool.
Do you know, like, what do you think the other people you've interviewed, do you find that most say the opposite, or what do they say?
It's either way. I talked to someone who was like, it was all mechanics, 100% mechanics. And then, they wanted these things to do certain things. Then like, okay, what kind of world would enable, a jumping mechanic and disintegrating platform mechanic.
Right.
They said, oh, well, frogs on a pond.
Right.
But then there's other people that, just totally the opposite. Just this is the theme, this is the world I want to create, and then they kind of worry about, okay, how is this gonna, how's it gonna work? How's it gonna mechanize?
Yeah. And what's your go-to game? What do you like to play?
My go-to game, on a being YouTube board game channel, it's almost like I feel like we never play the same game twice.
Right.
But there's games that we've gone past that I'm kind of looking back longingly at, and one of those is Dark Tower, which is sort of throwback to when I was a little kid playing it. But they, a buddy of mine got the remastered version. I love like Gloomhaven. I love the dungeon crawl, type games.
Yeah.
So, but really, I don't have the only one that I don't really like are I do have fun playing it, but like the judging games. Everyone answers a question, then one person picks the best one. I just those it's too easily derailed by the one person that is going to say, oh, I think that Fuzzy Bunny is scary. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I think there is a reason those games are popular, because they are, again, simple to play. It's an easy laugh. I can see where people get frustrated that it's same thing, different theme. Mm-hmm. To each their own, right?
Yeah, I like the problem with the heavy strategy games is that it's harder to find people. When I get together at a family gathering, it's you can't go wrong with a family-friendly party game, because you're going to have fun. It's going to be a good time. But you can't pull out some of these, Splendor or some of these, a little bit more complex games, because it's just not going to work. You have to have a family game, because and your audience is a little wider, and you're right, you can play those games more than once, typically, not always, if you don't really enjoy it or it's busted out. But I always say too, it's like in my game cabinet, like Monopoly, it's like, when was the last time I played Monopoly? Never. When my kids were young, and I guess I had to teach them how to play Monopoly, but it's like, it's, you think about that, and like in the mass market, or if I've pitched, they're like, what's the replayability on this game? And I'm like, well, that's interesting, because I don't think about that when I buy a game. I think about, like, this looks fun. If it's fun and we happen to play it again, or I want to play it with somebody else, that's great. Yeah.
My goal as a game designer is to sell the game, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I just need to sell everybody a copy. Like, that's really my end goal. If they play it more than once, that's great. I mean, yes, of course, then they're going to want to like it and tell it and say it to everybody else, but it's hard.
And to that end of selling everyone one of your games, what's the best way for someone to connect with EAP Toy and Games? Just directly the website? I'll put whatever you...
Yeah, you can go to the website. That'll teach you, you learn more about me, more about the company, more about the games, and give you some stuff. If you're looking for purchasing, all places to buy are on the website. Amazon, of course, is probably the go-to for most people, and that's where I send them easily. If it's at a store locally, I would love for you to, shop small and support some of these smaller stores, whether it's game store or toy store.
Okay.
Those are listed on my website as well. Okay. But any sale anywhere is, I'm thankful for.
You donate a portion of your proceeds from the sale of your games to a charity?
Yeah, so the charity I support, it's called the Backpack Society. It's a local charity here. So they help students of all ages, combat food insecurities, but meaning like they don't, they send them home with food from school. They have a pantry where they can go home for meals. Mm-hmm. And it's a great little local. I love being able to support locally so that I can
Right.
kind of, you know,
And it's
give my funds to someone and I see them the process, and it's, you know, believe it or not, it's happening in all the schools. It's not just, you know, poor economics. It's everywhere. So
hunger knows no zip code.
knows the code. Yeah, and they do a great job, and it's a female ran and found organization, and I love that. And yeah, they're really great.
Okay, we have a similar organization around here in the city that I'm in, and the cities by here, and you know, there's some pretty, you know, I live in Macomb County, but nearby Oakland County, it's a very high rent
Yeah.
county, but still, they have it there because there's still kids that, you know, they get decent meals at school for the school lunch, but then they go home and they just don't have it. So
They don't have it, they don't have snacks. And then if you think about breaks and summer breaks, holiday meals, all those things. Yeah. So it's really great that they have that service. I mean, it's even down to, you know, they were explaining to me why they do this. Like, even if a family is recently divorced or a parent dies or military, a lot of those situations cause a lot of financial strain. And the first thing to go is food, unfortunately. So it's very important to have, you know, schools with breakfast and lunch and snacks and be able to send them home with something without making the kid feel insecure about needing that.
mm-hmm.
It's a very simple process. And then they have their pantry weekends, evenings. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, well, it's great that you do that, and you know, everyone. There's one more reason. If it's not a good enough reason that you're going to get a great, you know, family party game for a lot of wide age range, the proceeds go to support something that is very, very important.
Yeah, especially with the lunchroom game, it was just like the perfect fit. It just made sense.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Chrissy. Well, thanks so much for talking to me. And
thanks for having me. This was really fun. I appreciate you reaching out.
Okay. Well, you take care, and everyone who's watching, we'll see you next time.
Thanks.